Have you ever heard of a bail-in? In a recent interview with Versan Al-Jarrah from Black Swan Capitalist, he mentioned something in that interview, and I want to play the clip.
I barely have any money in the bank, and it's not that I'm broke. I just don't trust it. And a bail-in is very likely to happen because the Fed made it abundantly clear that they will not be bailing in the people. I mean, bailing in the banks, bail out the banks. I'm sorry, guys. So they're not going to bail out the banks. They're going to actually do a bail-in. This actually was passed into law in 2017.
So it's really important to actually understand the circumstances that are required in order to create a bail-in situation. And put very simply, for all of those newcomers in this space or who haven't actually investigated what bail-ins are, let's look at bailouts first. We've seen this on the news quite a lot recently, and over history, this happens quite a lot. A bailout is essentially when the bank gets into some financial issues, which is hilariously ironic, but they get into financial issues and they require the government or the state to bail them out. So essentially get them out of the situation. Let's say the bank has a liquidity problem. By liquidity, I mean they don't have enough circulating money or accessible money to dive into and use for their expenses and the running of the business. So they actually ask the government to bail them out. And the government can do this, and that's a bailout. And that happens quite a lot. And you'll notice when I get into the whole Greek financial crisis in a second, you'll see how there is actually a limit on how many bailouts a government will do for banks and what they resort to afterwards. So before I get into what bail-ins actually are and describe what they are and the circumstances around them, I'm going to read out the timeline of events here relating to the Greek financial crisis that happened in 2015. So the first thing we have in this lead up to the financial crisis for Greece is that we have Greece experiencing a rise in budget deficit and a high level of public debt, wait for it, due to overspending and tax evasion. Now, I want you to think about the situation where we've been in right now, okay? Because I also want you, when you're listening to this, to also marry that up to the journey that we've been on basically since COVID happened. Eerily similar. So the banks and all of the population are in a bit of a sticky issue because they have been overspending. This is the first step in the process. As a way to come in and combat this, the next thing that happened was that the EU and the IMF swooped in to say, hey, we're going to bail you out, but there have to be some conditions. Essentially, one of those conditions being, you basically have to cut back on all of your spending and we'll bail you out. With a bailout, there are terms and conditions that the IMF and the EU need the country to follow in order to basically sign the deal. We'll give you the money if you cut back on spending. So the EU, IMF, and Greece all then agreed that that would be what they would do. But what happened in 2012 was that Greece received a second bailout package from the EU and the IMF. But only this time, when they said, but you have to cut back spending again, the public opposed this opinion. This was a real stumbling block. The public did not want to cut spending yet again. And let's think about it the way we are right now, right? We overspent with COVID and the lockdown and how that affected the economy, right? We just pumped it up. We overspent. Then we've pulled back on spending. Now inflation's going up and everyone's struggling. Imagine if that happened again. They were going to pull back even further. Gas prices were going to go even higher. Life as we know it was going to get even more expensive. Would that come with public opposition? Most likely it would. And so you can see as this journey's gone on the lead up to the financial crisis for Greece, it looks the same. It looks the same as the situation we're in right now. And here's where it took a tipping point into what we call a bail-in. Now, to avoid default again, because the Greek banks were all about to default on their debts yet again after the second bailout from the IMF and the EU, they said, we're going to bail you out, but you have to now also have a bail-in. And these were the conditions set by the IMF and the EU for Greece. A bail-in, and this is where it gets real scary, means that they aren't taking the money from the government anymore. They're taking the money from your bank account. How this looks in real life is those people in Greece would have gone to their bank account, gone to an ATM, tried to withdraw money, and no money would come out. They had nothing in their bank to withdraw. Everything frozen. A little bit like Jim Rickard's Ice 9 theory, right? They have molded the laws over time so that it's a bit like putting a frog in cold water and slowly bringing that water up to boiling temperature. The frog doesn't really know the change in temperature and ultimately dies. This is what they've done with the BailIn laws over time, and they've made it to such a point where they could agree at any moment with the IMF and with the EU or whatever higher power exists in your realm of the world. They could ultimately say, you have to do a bail-in now, we're not bailing you out anymore, so you've got to do a bail-in, and these are our conditions. They can stop you withdrawing your money, they can take money out of your bank account and use it to settle their debt. So when you put money in the bank, please understand, if this example doesn't show it, when the money's in the bank, it is not your money. It is theirs. They are using it for however they want. Even if they didn't pay their debts and they managed their money wrong, they overspent, you pay their debt. That is wild. So bail-ins are a real nightmare for people. Now, it's not like they take 100% of what's in your bank account. I'm sure for some people that did happen. But the way that it's been worded in my research about this Greek financial crisis is that lots of people had percentages of their assets in their bank account taken out. Now, this leads me into a realm of when we're going to start looking in the future for regulated and insured entities. Every single entity that exists right now in the current financial system has a limit to how much they will insure in a specific bank. So in the UK, I can't speak for other countries, but it'll be something similar. In the UK, you are insured up to £85,000 in your account per person, per bank, not per account. So you can't make multiple accounts in the same bank. It's per person, per bank. If you've got £170,000, if you want all of that insured, you actually have to divide that up, 85 and 85, with different banks, allowing you to be fully insured up to £85,000. Because you can bet that if you've got £100,000 and you've got it in one account and they have a bail-in, they're probably going to take your £15,000 there and you're not getting it back because it's not insured. So how do we navigate this whole crypto future when we're looking at having our crypto in the custody of banks when this service becomes available? And this really is a problem question, because I addressed this in an earlier video weeks and weeks ago about the idea of spreading your assets across different banks to allow yourself to be fully insured for the full amount across the board, right? This is really, really difficult. It's going to be an absolute nightmare to work in that way. Hopefully, we have the likes of PolySign or another custodianship service that actually insures you for a higher amount. Or maybe there are specific ways that you can underwrite these agreements to where you are in fact insured to a higher degree at a certain fee. These are all things that we would have to take advantage of if we had significantly more wealth than would be insured. But here's where it gets a little bit more bullish and a little bit less scary, because in this wealth transfer, we have to look at the situation of the current economic system. I think we're in consensus that the economy is on its way down. It is crashing, if not already crashed. The big problem that the banks have right now is a liquidity problem. They don't have access to cash readily available. And when you have countries or regions of the world like the BRICS nations removing themselves slowly away from the dollar, this puts banks in a real situation who are trying to deal with these BRICS countries, because if you don't hold the currency that they want to be traded with in, then you can't trade with them. A lot of the trade from the Western world comes from the BRICS nations. So this is a real problem. So if we're running out of liquidity and overspending and lack of money, lack of liquidity in the market is what causes the steps and the process that happens when you have bailout, 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 bail-in. We can see the writing on the wall here, right? I mean, is anyone following along here with what I'm feeling here? If there's a liquidity problem and the whole world is in this liquidity problem, because in this example, we're talking about Greece, one country. Yes, let's do a bail-in. Let's just take some Greek people's money from their accounts. But if all the banks are getting close to defaulting across the world, all of them, do you just bail in using everyone's funds from across the world? Or do you think that would cause some sort of panic and mass hysteria globally, not just localized to Greece? This would be a global panic. So if we want to avoid a global panic, we have to avoid this liquidity crisis that would require a bail-in, because a bail-in worldwide would cause riots. And I think this is what Black Swan Capitalist and many other people who think it's going that way, you know, it's going to riots on the street, it's going to water being the most valuable asset that there is. It's going that direction. That means mass bail-ins. There's money getting taken out of their bank accounts worldwide. I wish there was a solution actually to this liquidity crisis, a way for banks to kind of dip in and out of a liquidity pool. That's a good idea. And this is where I think the Ripple ODL, if you didn't catch the hint, the on-demand liquidity that Ripple offers is a breakthrough product that is most beneficial at the worst of times. And I think the worst of times are on their way. If we are headed towards mass bail-ins across the world, there is only one savior in all of this, and it's an on-demand liquidity product by Ripple. And within that, XRP, the token, is the agnostic bridge asset, allowing for the transfer of every currency into any other currency through the blockchain, utilizing the XRP token. And of course, research like this makes me even more bullish all the time about XRP, XLM, and XDC, and really all of these ISO related tokens that are gonna be the ecosystem for the new financial world. So when I'm buying, and I'm buying to hold and put in my cold storage wallet, I do all of that on Uphold. They're the most stable exchange you'll find out there in all the ups and downs of the market. They have proven that they are stable and will secure your funds and also allow you to move to cold storage wallet immediately. If you want to buy on Uphold, the link is in the description. Stay emotionless out there, and I'll see you in the next one.